Well, for married couples, I'd say love one another, work things out, don't let it stew. And as we have already mentioned, put God first in your life, attend church, raise your children in church. Um, as the Bible says, when they're old, they will not depart from it. And that's true because I have seen that work in lives before. Um, for anything to work, you have to work at it and you have to uh, do your part. Be willing to forgive, forget. You know, marriages aren't easy. When you first marry, you've got a lot of adjusting to do to get used to one another. It don't happen overnight. It takes time, and it just if something happens you don't like, don't just throw up your hands and quit. Just go on.
Marriage is a 50-50 thing. You gotta give as well as receive.
What's your very first childhood memory?
I guess my first childhood memory is I had a little straw hat, and it had little balls around the brim of it, and I thought it was so pretty. And I was very young at that age. But that's about the first thing that I really remember.
A mini pearl hat.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was as proud of it as Minnie Pearl was hers. I didn't wear the price tag on it, though.
I guess when my first husband had his first stroke, because he wasn't able to do things that he had done in the past. And I knew that it was my turn to do more and take care of things. He lived 6 years after he had his first stroke. Of course, he wasn't down disabled or anything like that, but he still had had a few cows and had some goats and had his dogs, and he took care of all of that. But a lot of I guess you could say the business part, I did that. And I would advise any young person to try to be where that if something like that happened, they could take over and do whatever needed to be done.
Our children all come here on Sunday for lunch and then back for supper, and we love it. It's like a three-ring circus. It's very noisy, and you're proud to see them leave, but then next Sunday you're proud to see them come back. And we love our Sundays, even though they are tiring, but we love every minute of it. And I guess that would be the best part, because that they want to come. And they bring friends, and that really makes you feel good when your grandchildren especially brings their friends, especially after they get grown. It makes you feel good.
And they enjoy it too.
They do. We're Granny and Papa to all of them. And our son, that's the paramedic, when he has to work on Sundays, if they have an opportunity at lunchtime, him and his partner comes and eats lunch. They don't always have that opportunity, but if they do, and it makes us feel good that his partners wants to come.
Steve came home one night and he thought he thought he found something in the floor. Is that what you're talking about? Mm-hmm. And he said, these kids are in here eating these milk duds. I'm getting them all over everything, all over the floor and everywhere. And he went to get them up, and he picked them up, and he went, they're not milk duds.
Did you have a favorite kid?
No,
No?
They were all special. It's kind of strange how you remember things like that when you were a child, and now then you can't remember what happened yesterday, hardly.
Yes.
I can't, at least.
We're thankful that our children um, have all got good marriages, and that we're so blessed with that, that they do have, and they're strong in their marriages, and we're thankful for that. And we hope we've set a few examples for them along the way.
If you could go back to any age, would that be 16 again?
No, I don't think I'd like to relive my life. I've enjoyed my life, and I'm happy with my life. So I don't think I'd go back to any age. I'm proud of every year I've got.
And how many children do you have?
2 or 3. Back when we were young, when the kids were young, after Carolyn and I got married, of course Carolyn had 2, Roy and Denise, from her first marriage. Again, she was a widow, and so she had 2 children from her first marriage, and I had Lauren, who lived with Gail, his mother. So when we would have friends over, or visiting and talking and playing cards, and the things that we did, most of them were Navy, not all of them, but a lot of them were Navy folks that I was teaching with, I was teaching for the Navy on active duty. And they would say, they would ask that question, well, how many kids you got? Well, we'd say, well, 2 or 3, and you get this kind of strange look, and it's just, well, it depends, if during the week we have 2, so most weekends we have 3, so it's 2 or 3. And then they look at us, and we'd say, well, we'd let that kind of ride because the best part was yet to come. And they'd say, okay, well, and then we'd say, okay, well, it's 3. And then they would say, oh, okay, well, how old are they? And we would say, well, they're 5 and 7. Wait a minute. 3, yeah, 5 and 7, yeah. Oh, twins, no. And now they start scratching their head again. And we'd say, Denise is 5 and the boys are 7. Roy was born in February and Lauren was born in July. And then they're going, wait a minute, February, July, that's okay. But eventually we would give up and tell them, we were an amalgamated family. But that was always a lot of fun, is to
Working in the field.
Field, yes.
And chores at home. One of my chores as I got older was to fix supper at night. Most of the time my mother would have something cooked. All I had to do was warm it up. But I learned how to cook on a wood stove. I remember when we got electricity. We didn't have electricity when I was born. So I remember when we got electricity. But my mother and my twin brother would go to the barn and milk the cows. So my chore was to have supper ready when they got back from the barn. So when we finally got electricity and finally got able to get an electric stove, my mama wouldn't let me cook on it for a long time. I think she liked being able just to turn that button and have heat, not having to build a fire and wait for it to get a certain temperature before you could cook.
Well, I love all my grandchildren. Some say, well, I'm partial, but I'm not. I may, there's some, you have to treat some, you can't treat them all exactly alike because they're all different. But I love all of them. They've all lived with me except one. And of course, he's in New York, so he hadn't lived with me. But the oldest one, he lived here. Of course, his mother and daddy separated, and he lived here. And then the second one, same thing happened to him. And he didn't live as long as the others did, but Brenda's 3 children, they lived here for several years. And they feel close to me, and I do them. They're just like my own children because we just practically raised them. But I don't love them any more than I do the others. They're all the same. But I guess I am different by them because they have different personalities.
Oh, my brother Gary, he was an angel. He was so sweet. He lived to be 16. He had cerebral palsy, and we would sit there at night and just talk. And he loved to sit up till 10 o'clock and watch the news. There was a newsman on there. His name was Fred Cook, I think. And he would tell the 10 o'clock news, and my brother would laugh all the way through it. He just thought he was so funny. I won't remember when he passed away. He passed away at home. And Mama was just all beside herself. He had swelling of the brain. His brain swelled, and it caused him to convulse. It was not good. They sent me across the street, told me to go and practice my piano. And he passed away while I was gone.
Now, when Martin Luther King was shot, that was a little different. By then, I was in the Navy. In fact, that was 68. And I know exactly where I was when he was shot because I was driving down Danny Thomas Boulevard in Memphis, literally when he was physically shot. I mean, right at that time, I was driving down Danny Thomas Boulevard, headed downtown. I was active duty Navy at the time, going to school at Millington. And I was headed downtown and just driving along, minding my own business, and cop cars came out of everywhere. I mean, they were just all screaming. And I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? And I got to where I was going downtown, and they told me Martin Luther King has been shot. And that, I mean, literally right then. And I remember what happened. I remember that Mayor Henry Lowe, mayor of the city of Memphis at the time, immediately declared a curfew and called out the National Guard. I mean, instantly called out the National Guard and declared a curfew. And you know, it was like the streets were bare. I mean, there was nothing because the National Guard was the only thing on the streets by about 6 o'clock that night. Amazing stuff. For what all went on in Watts and in Chicago and all those other places, Memphis was calm. I mean, just amazing.
When I was growing up, as I mentioned, the older children from my mother, her oldest daughter was married and living in Louisville, Kentucky. And they came home just about every Christmas. And they would usually get in on Christmas Eve night. And they wouldn't get in till midnight or a little after. Well, we would all be in the bed asleep. So when they come in, of course, we all got up and Santa Claus would have already come. There'd be our presents under the tree. So I remember that from a child. It was that way for many years when we was growing up. So that was, and another fond memory of Christmas time. Uh, we always had a live Christmas tree, and when school would let out for Christmas, me and my brothers would go to the woods and chop down a tree and bring it to the house, and our mother would help us get it set up, and then we'd decorate it. So that was a tradition that don't go on anymore.
Back then, Mom and Dad never had a car while I was at home. If we went anywhere, like the school bus had to run and we'd go on the school bus, or we would go with friends or something like that. And we were, I guess me and Herland was closer than any of the other children because we were older and the others were younger. So where one of us went, the other one went. We had friends in the community, and we would get together like on Saturday nights and play games. And we had a lot of fun, even if we didn't have much.
Well, I was waiting for him to come back to the room, and I was down at the canteen, and I was standing in the hallway, and the nurse brought Neil down the hall. When she got down there where I was, she opened him up and said, "He's all boy." So that's the first time I saw him. And then it was the next day before Johnny got to see him.
I had to have a cesarean. The baby was big and I wasn't built right, they said. Anyway, I had to have the cesarean, and I don't know if I just was out of it so much I couldn't see him that first day, but I didn't get to see him till the next day. And when they brought him in to me, the first thing they showed me, they turned him over and showed me his back. He had a birthmark on his back. And that's the first thing the nurses showed me when they brought him to me. And he weighed 9 pounds and 4 ounces. And some of the people that worked there, when they would come in, they would talk about how big he was. And one little nurse particular, she come in and she's talking about how much she loved her baby. She said, "It's got a wrinkle here, and it's got a wrinkle here, and it's got a wrinkle here." It was cute the way they did.
And Mama says, "It's time for your nap, Lauren." He said, and she told him, says, "Now don't get in there and get into those cookies. You go on and take your nap, and you can have some cookies when you wake up." You've heard this, huh? And Lauren, he was the sweetest little thing there ever was. And those little stink pots, they went in there, excuse me, about a half hour or an hour after he'd gone to sleep, and took a whole bunch of cookies and just crumbled around there where he was laying. And he went in there, they went in there running, "Mama, Mama, look, he got in and ate all the cookies." She went in there, spanked his butt, and I had him asleep. Oh, when they told me they did that, I ain't never forgot that. I said, "You remember all them licks I gave you? I meant them, every one of them." But that's the kind of stuff they pull. They were terrible.
Okay. What about your father?
Well, he farmed, he sharecropped all the time. I think his dad passed away when he was 15 years old, so he kind of became the man of the house for Granny Bolton and at that time, and I guess they had kind of a rough time coming up. He always farmed, and during his farming time, he used a mule and plows. He didn't have this nice farm machinery like I see past here all the time. And he had to work hard in the field. And he didn't, us girls were the oldest. Our brother was the youngest, so we had to help him in the field. So we've done everything that you do working in the field. Of course, it was hard work growing up on the farm. But we enjoyed it. We didn't know any better or anything. So we just really enjoyed it. We didn't know we was working all that hard at that time. Some people call it the good old days, but I prefer this lifestyle better. So,
A bargain's not a bargain unless you need it.
So, tell me about the clock up here.
Well, when I was real small, of course, back then, girls had, we called them playhouses. We built out in the yard, you know, and around, had our little dishes and things. And I told my grandmother, I said, when you get through with that clock, I want you to let me have it to put in my playhouse. Well, years and years later, after her husband died, she stayed with my mother some and with her son. She had the only 2 kids. And the clock was at my mother's, and it wouldn't run at that time. I don't know what had happened to it, but anyway, it was on the mantle where my mother and Daddy lived. And we were over there one Sunday, and she said, "Wita, you can take that clock home with you anytime you want to." So I got it, and I carried it and had it fixed, and it still runs.
You know how old it is?
It's over 100 years old, but I don't know how much. Because she got it not too long after her and her husband married, I'm sure.
So when you were a kid, what was your daily routine like?
well, in the summertime, it was working on the farm. And that was just about from early morning until late afternoon. And we would get off on Saturdays, but that day was filled up mostly with washing or ironing, or at that time you didn't let grass grow on your yard. We'd dig up that grass and sweep the yard with a brush broom, they called it.
If you could travel into the future and meet your future generations of your family, say Jonathan and Megan's grandchildren or great-grandchildren, what kind of message would you give them?
It's difficult. I took a class once called Futurism and had trouble kind of visualizing, what the future would be like, knowing how fast things are changing, and figuring that my great-great-great-grandchildren are going to be in a totally different world than I am. The only thing that I could think that would still be pertinent to them is that no matter what's going on around you, your life is under your control. And maybe not so much your life, but your attitude about life is under your control. It is not, there have been hard times in my life. There have been extremely busy times in my life. There have been very sad times in my life. But my attitude is what I can control. Circumstances, maybe not, but attitude, I can. And that's the only thing that will carry into the future, is that we always will have that control, no matter what else goes on. That we will always have control of.